Journey maps. So imagine you're tasked with designing something for people going to get coffee. Now, if your understanding is that people get coffee and then they drink it, you've missed out on a lot of the different steps and stages in between people determining they want a cup of coffee till the point that they enjoy it. So we're going to break it down step by step by step, and that's what we mean by Journey Map. So the very first thing that happens when someone decides to get coffee is they decide to get coffee. So the very first step of my Journey Map is the decision of someone saying, I could really go for a cup of joe. Right, so then your next question is, what happens next? So I'm going to draw an arrow. What happens next is they have a choice. There's this moment of reckoning during which they say, in my town, we've got choice 1, 2, or 3 for where to get a coffee. Now, who knows what happens in this moment of decision, but let's say, ding, 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 coffee shop number 3 wins. What happens next? What happens next is you got to get to the coffee shop. So there's a trip towards getting the coffee, and that's why we have an arrow here. What happens next? Well, next you have, let's say they drove and they had to park and walk. Right, so we'll have a park and walk little bucket. What happens next? Let's say there's a door and you have to walk inside the coffee shop. What happens next? Let's say here, now that you're in the coffee shop, you don't get to go to the front of the line, but let's say there's a bunch of people in a line, and that's sort of the first experience that you have in the coffee shop. So we're going to draw this big old group of line. These are all people, if you couldn't tell before. People waiting for coffee just like you are. So then what happens? Well, I suppose it's at that point that you're introduced to the menu, right? Let's say there's a bunch of choices of different teas and hot chocolates and different types of coffee products. What happens next? Let's say, boom, it's your turn. Ding, ding, ding. So this is an exciting moment. We can call it the selection moment. It's like you've been selected from all these different people to come order now. So this is the moment when you are interacting with your barista. Right, and they say, good day, sir, and you say, good day, and they say, well, what kind of coffee would you like? So that's sort of this two-person interaction. These are little dialogue bubbles. Okay. So what happens next? After you've ordered coffee, maybe there's another question about, like, are you interested in eating something? This is a croissant, and this is a little muffin. So then that's a question following your order. You get the idea. You know, next up, someone says, well, you got to pay for your coffee, and then you have a question about, do you pay with cash or do you pay with a credit card? And then running out of space here, there's a wait. You got to wait for your coffee to be prepared. And following that is, this is the exciting moment. This is where you and your coffee are introduced, like love at first sight. Make this a hot cup of coffee. And then maybe the final moment of interaction is that sweet moment where you have your first sip. So what does this illustrate? This illustrates, for starters, that this whole idea was totally wrong. That there's no such thing as getting coffee and then drinking it, but rather there's a bunch of different steps along the way, from determining that you want a cup of coffee all the way to your first sip. So an experience then, the coffee experience, ends up being this series of steps, and you as a designer need to understand them in totality, because all these steps are connected. And frankly, your experience getting a cup of coffee is only as strong as your weakest link. So let's say this is all great except for you had terrible traffic here. Your entire experience of getting to coffee ends up being influenced by that traffic. Or maybe the line was super long and you got really annoyed. It doesn't matter how good the pastries are at that point, you know, you're in a bad mood. So they're all connected. Only strong is your weakest link. The other thing that a journey map does here, beyond helping you understand the totality of the experience, is help you come up with interesting moments for intervention. So maybe by creating this journey map, you say, you know what, this is a really interesting moment. It's this moment of selection. Like, I feel inspired by this. Let's design something for this moment. Maybe it's a piece of music that plays when it's your turn to order, or you get a 5-second massage when it's your time to order. Whatever it is, if you hadn't identified that there is this moment in time called the selection moment, you wouldn't know to design for it, right? Maybe it's actually the waiting in line, and you say there's a really interesting opportunity to share information about the history of our company while people are waiting in line. We can, I don't know, we can show them a little movie on this little baby screen. In order to start making a journey map, it's really simple. You decide where you want to start and where you want to end. Those are two great things to have in mind. And after each step along the way, you just ask yourself, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? And at the end, you've got this interesting artifact that lays out all the opportunities for intervention. So that's a journey map. Don't forget, the only way to start designing is to start designing.